And what I'd like to invite you to today is to consider how everything is in relationship. Um, um, we'll be talking about the five powers or the five indriyas, which develop into powers. And just to clarify these are faith or confidence, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. They work together. And the reason I want to emphasize those powers is because they're an example of something called dependent arising. They're practices that go together, but when I talk about dependent arising, I'm talking about a principle of conditionality, how one thing conditions another, how nothing arises in and of itself. And when we can understand dependent arising, it gives us great insight and also great power to transform our suffering to freedom. So dependent arising is this understanding that when this is, that is. When this arises, that arises. And when this is not, that is not. When this ceases, that ceases. And I'm just quoting a phrase that's found in the sutras regularly. So what that means is that when we have, say, a cause of suffering, we have suffering. Like if we're getting entangled with craving, grasping, clinging, when we're lost in ignorance, then when that is, we will have suffering. We'll have mental suffering or psychological suffering, or dukkha, if you want to call it that. And the opposite of that is also true. When we don't have craving, or when we don't experience, when we don't feed into the causes of suffering, such as greed, ignorance, and hatred, then we don't have that suffering. So when this is not, that is not. When this ceases, that ceases. And not having that suffering is great liberation, is great freedom. And you can think about it in ultimate terms, or you could think about it in relative terms. And in ultimate terms, you can think about it as nibbana, like when we no longer crave, when we've seen through our ignorant behaviors, for example, when we no longer are caught up in patterns of greed, ignorance, and hatred, we are free. We are free from the binds of those patterns. We are free from the binds of samsara, and we are free, and we realize nibbana or nirvana. And nirvana is not a thing. It's more like it's a realization, and it's a seeing through the reality of ourselves and realities of life and the realities of the world. So it's liberating. It's freeing because we're no longer bound to the patterns and cycles of suffering. It's called samsara, going round and round in cycles of suffering. So the reason I mention that is because today I want to talk about the five bala, also called the five indriya. The five indriya are called faculties, and the five bala, they are when they transform into powers. Now, the five indriya, as I mentioned earlier, is confidence, or it's called, in Pali, it's called saddha, and it's like where you put your heart. And it can be translated as confidence, as I mentioned. It can also be translated as trust. It can also be translated as conviction. It's what gets us out. In my talk a bit later, I'll be talking about this, but it's what motivates us to do something. It's like if you want to talk about nibbana, for example, for most of us, there's an intuition that it's true. We have a confidence that it's a possibility. We have a confidence that there is the reality of non-clinging. There is the reality of breaking free from suffering. And because of that we could call it trust, because we haven't really, we may have never really experienced it, but we know that it's possible and we trust that it's possible. That trust will give us energy to do something. It will give us energy to come on days of meditation. It'll give us energy to start our meditation practice, to do whatever we need to do. It gives us energy to do that. And when we start to have a bit of energy behind our movement, then we start to become more aware. And this is mindfulness. We become aware of what's happening in the world and what's happening in our body and mind. And then with that, there's a coming together of our streams of attention. So they're all going in the same direction. And this is called concentration, unification of mind, or unifying mind. And that gives us power to see through things and see things how they actually are. And then with that, we gain wisdom. So that's and with the wisdom, it strengthens our trust, or it strengthens our confidence that this reality is possible. So I'm relating that way I'm relating that kind of pattern in an absolute way, like the realities of Nibbana. But I'm also relating that pattern in a way where we can see and have confidence in overcoming our relative suffering. Like, in our overcoming of our relative suffering, we might be just dealing with some everyday, issues that are happening in our lives. Sometimes we could call them therapeutic issues, or issues of suffering that keep us bound to cycles of negative patterns and habits. So, and in this case, we may not be experiencing Nibbana, but we're aiming for a kind of a relative freedom from our relative sufferings. So it could be something as simple as remembering that the last time you came to a day of meditation, or the last time you did some meditation, there was a bit of spaciousness in your heart. Like remembering that, like there was a bit of spaciousness. Maybe you got relaxed a little bit. And you didn't experience Nibbana, but you felt a little bit uplifted or relaxed or calm, or something that we could call a kind of a spiritually pleasant, if you want to put it in those terms. And so you have the confidence that maybe if you do that again, something like that might happen again. So you put in the energy to turn on, your computer and, log on to a day of meditation. And then also you put in the energy to sit or stand or walk or whatever you're doing in terms of meditation, and apply yourself. And when you apply yourself with mindfulness, like being aware, like being present for experience, rather than going off on tangents, and rather than being distracted by hundreds of things. I mean, I hope you've turned off your mobile phones, for example, or you've switched off social media, for example. And when we can be present with the way things actually are, like the reality of this right now, and our minds begin to be unified around this present moment rather than being distracted in every which direction, then we see the reality of that tendency to be caught up in relative suffering. Like, well, is there anything such as relative suffering? I don't think so. I think there's just suffering, suffering or dukkha, if you like. And then when we see that, we have some freedom. We might experience, some spiritual pleasure. It might be good. Even if it's just a sense of relief, it might be good. So that's what we'll be doing today. I'll be encouraging you to slip into this particular system. Although, when you talk about the systems that lead to freedom, there's many of them. There's many kind of in Buddhism, especially. There's many kind of systems that go together. When we understand cause-effect relationships, or when we understand conditionality, we begin to see that if I do this, or when this is happening, that is also happening. And earlier on, I talked to Paul about beginning to notice pleasant experiences, but then kind of discerning whether it's a spiritually pleasant experience or a hedonic pleasant experience. A hedonic pleasant experience is like pleasant experiences that come from the senses, like, having a nice cup of tea or a good meal, or, feeling pleasant in your body based on something that you're consuming. So if we can notice spiritual pleasure, for example, then something that connects with is the possibility for joy arising. And joy is a little bit more kind of a bubbly energy that rises in our body, and it kind of gives us, it's kind of like the fruit of concentration, and it's also the results of being on the path. And even this joy can result from just recognizing we're mindful. I mean, it's really interesting. It doesn't have to be a profound, overwhelming bliss. It can be just this, like I'm noticing a smile on Paul's face. I mean, look at the feeling behind that smile, Paul. And it could be because you're hearing Dhamma and something's clicking, and that would be, I would call that spiritual pleasure. So it's noticing that. So when we notice that, and we start to bring our mind, collect our mind around that, it transforms to tranquility. It can, when there's spiritual pleasure, there may also be joy arises. When there's joy, there may be tranquility arise. Tranquility is this relaxation of body and calm of mind. And when there's tranquility, there may be happiness. And this is a more subtle type of happiness than just the happiness of getting what we want. It's the happiness of cultivating our minds, concentrating and doing the practice. And that possibility, having happiness in our heart, something that rises in our heart and bringing a smile to our hearts, that is a kind of a condition for the arising of contentment, which is a much deeper, it's a more subtle, deeper, it's a mix of happiness and equanimity, actually. And when there's that, it can help arise. When this is, that also is. When this is, that arises, for example. And that could be what it can result in is a deep equanimity. Now, that's just one pattern that you can see. And another pattern you could see is the Eightfold Path: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Just tuning into one of those steps, one of those factors, and initiates another factor, and so on and so forth. So today in the meditations, I'll guide you into meditations. That's what we usually do. I'll invite you to just be present. And we'll do two meditations, probably a loving kindness meditation to begin with. And then we'll do just a simple mindfulness of breathing meditation, just the first steps of mindfulness of breathing. There's 16 steps of mindfulness of breathing practice, and I'll just invite you to the first few steps. And then what I'll do is I'll invite you in a way where you put yourself on the chair or cushion, or if you're lying down on the mat, and that I'll encourage you to have some confidence in that it's going to be worthwhile. And I think perhaps you're getting confidence just by listening to these instructions. So that's the initial thing. then I'll encourage you to put some energy to it, like establish what you're doing, attend to it. Then I'll encourage you to be mindful. And then I'll then I'll invite you to notice your mind becoming more concentrated. And then I invite you to see clearly. And with the seeing clearly, you might gain some wisdom and understanding. So the two meditations, first one will be loving kindness meditation. And in that meditation, I'll just invite you to come to your heart and remind yourself of things that rouse a warm feeling of benevolence within your heart. It could be being with your pet, or it could be being with a friend, it could be being with going to a place that's really awesome, something that brings about a warm feeling in your heart. And I mean, I usually say that on these days, I usually mention how just the thought of my grandchildren often brings that warm feeling into my heart, even though when sometimes they're a pain in the butt. Sometimes, even then, I can still have a warm feeling to my heart, coming to my heart when I think about them. Or I've often referred to my dog. My dog's sometimes he's sitting on the chair out there, but it's not right there because he's with my partner. But just he greets me with a smile every day for the last 5 years, which is about how old he is. He's come home and he's, oh, hello, Malcolm. It's so good to see you. You just go, his whole body moves and his eyes are just loving me. It's so wonderful. Coming home to that, every time I come home, he does that. So wonderful. So just thinking of that, for example, brings a warm feeling to my heart. And then we can attend to that experience. We can keep the memory in mind or you can keep the vision in mind, but what's important here now is to attend to that experience of warmth and benevolence and loving kindness in your heart. And then in the attending to it, it's like it's nourished and it's nurtured. You can use words if you like. Sometimes I use words. Sometimes I say words like, oh, may I be happy. May I be peaceful, and say them sincerely, not with a, really craving to be happy. It's not like that. It's just like may I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free from anxiety or something like that. Free from fear. And sometimes that works, and other times you don't need to use words, or words may not resonate with you, and you can use something else. Well, in whatever way you do it, you're nourishing this feeling of metta or loving kindness, and then you just let it radiate. Okay, so I think is there any questions about that? Oh, look, I'll just give a bit of format for the day. What we'll do is we'll probably have 2 guided meditations to begin with. And if you want to just let those guided meditations segue into one another, that's fine. Otherwise, probably I'll ring the bell at the beginning of each meditation and ring a bell at the end of each meditation. If you want to just move and stretch between those meditations, that's fine. The second meditation is the same. You may want to segue onto those 2 meditations together. Then, depending on the time, we'll have a silent meditation where you do what you feel is suitable for you. And if you're not sure what to do, just do what we were doing before. Bring that to mind and have it in your mind what we did before, and just do that again, or open to that again. And we'll have a break at 20 to 11 for a cup of tea or whatever you need. And then we'll come back at 11 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Time for a Dharma talk. And then after the Dharma talk, we might have some discussion. I think Helen might join us for the Dharma talk. So, there'll be at least one more person around. And then we have a lunch break at 12:30 to 1:30, and come back at 1:30. We have an hour of sitting or walking or meditation in some ways. Usually I split them up in half, so there's a 30-minute break, but sometimes people sit through for the whole hour. And then we have Dharma discussion at 2:30. Okay.